How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to TheBlueShifting, and welcome back to Higurashi When They Cry, Section 4, Chapter 4. So, I've been hearing a lot of things about this chapter, and we got some spicy stuff to go over right away. So, first things first, last ending of the rap party / full cast event, they talked about how the next part was going to be the next major one, and that apparently Shion was going to be the main character, which is a very fascinating idea. I love the idea of actually switching, like have a dramatic change of point of view to get some of the answers that just were not accessible to Keiichi at all. That makes a lot of sense for what they call the answers arc. The idea that like what's actually going to fill in all the gaps and make the mystery like actually come all together. The reveal, you could say, would necessitate having access to information that Keiichi just fundamentally could not have. I actually think it's really, really fascinating, and I'm very excited to see that. But this chapter is not going to be, I guess, what is it called? Himatsubushi? I guess someone said in a comment that Himatsubushi is like wasting time or something along those lines of a translation. The idea being that this was a bit of a filler series. This chapter was a bit of a bonus one that was about kind of making up time for the delay, which someone pointed out, like, I guess these chapters were being released fairly like quickly. Like I obviously can't know for sure unless I do digging. I can't sadly do much research until I finish a series. Otherwise I might accidentally spoil myself with something. So I kind of have to stay away from wiki pages and all that kind of stuff. But what was left in the comments last episode is to be believed. Apparently, each episode came out about 6 months apart from each other, but they were being written kind of like as they went live. So they'd go live, and then like the next chapter would be written and published in the next like 6 months, which is crazy if you actually understand the process of writing and the quality of the writing that we've seen. Again, especially for like a personal project, it's phenomenal. And so the idea that they had only one major delay, that they also wrote a story for to make up for the gap between like chapter 3 and what would be chapter 5, they threw out a whole different game called chapter 4. And here we are. But I noticed something very interesting. We're getting all the settings set up again and getting the 07th expansion set up. You can do your configurations, right? And there's lots of them we go through, and I'm sure I messed something up because every game I swear I do. So keep in mind, like, hey, if you think there's something I've done wrong in the setup that you think would be better to change, we can change it. However, there's also going to be conflicting opinions. Some people think that, like, for instance, like the music should always be just the OG tracks. There's much as you can use. Some people say that the console music is a lot better just because it's more refined and personalized. There's also like a fan-made series of music that's like meant to be like very similar to the original releases, but also distinct enough that's not causing copyright issues. Because I guess the original release used a lot of music that has since been copyrighted. I don't know if it was copyright material at the time. It could have been just because I'm sure these came out during the more Wild West period of the internet, where the copyright law enforcement online was not too big of a thing for a while. So I can see that being a thing. But regardless of that, I go with what the best I can. We should have the proper like sprites selected. I've gotten better because I know what all of it means, because I'll get the jargon that's in the mod files is not very clear for people who don't know how mods or computers work very well. And I'm like, I have like just a tiny bit of information about that. I'm kind of in the know about these things, so I can get a good idea, but even then I mess it up. But I know something really interesting in here. We're going to go into here. We got all these. This is the standard configurations. Then we have the mod menu. And there's this little thing right here, right? You do see choice mode. I was like, saw that. I was like, wait, what? It was automatically clicked on skip / auto good ending. It skips the choices, proceeds towards the good ending. So first of all, has this always been a thing? And I just didn't realize that I was not having to choose anything in the games that I should have been choosing. I'm pretty sure it wasn't, because I feel like I would have noticed. But then this one, it's like, oh, so you have auto skip good ending, the normal, or highlighted good, which basically says, hey, here's all the choices you can pick, but here's the one that gets you forward. Obviously, we're going to start with the normal. If I have to, I feel like I'm faffing around because, granted, I have a tendency in horror-themed, choice-based visual novels. I have this weird magnetism of logicking my way into bad endings. I think one of the ones I did specifically was it Enigma? I think it was a while ago. More of an indie title, very interesting one. But in that one, I came to find that, like, of the 2 or 3 routes that I did in the game, I literally hit every bad ending, every single one you could hit, without trying to. I just was like completely thinking my way right into the bad path, and had to look up like the good path in the end to get to a like proper ending, and that was just awful. So let me know if you what you think. But we're going to be, I'm going to keep it on normal for now, just because, why not? Either, I've always had in all the games, I should have been having choices to make, and if that is the case, I don't know why no one said anything about it, because I feel like you would have said, hey, let's see what happens. So yeah, like, I'm planning to do the choices, whatever they're going to end up being. Then I think for audio, the OST remake and new metagamma, like, combination, I think is probably the best. We could try and go for this the GIN. I think the GIN is supposed to be like the original. So actually maybe this would be the better one. Fan-made option replaces 9 with a handmade remakes. All the tracks use the GIN OG. Maybe that is the better one. Override to see. So that's the other thing though, is like, it forces the following sound effects, ignores the preset SE for GEN SE. That's another one too. Like these I don't know which one's best. So gosh darn it. I know I want one of these two. But okay, so GIN background music. It's virtually identical to what's introduced in the Japanese release. Made their debut, or because the original conversions of these were extremely poor, this pack instead uses the same conversions as the new gen manga game or BGM. It used to be similar to the pre-alpha update in the South in SE. Option previously known as original or BGM SE fix. So yeah, I think I'm gonna do this combo here, and then Jin sound effects or the new SE sound effects. Like, let me know if we need to change these. But sorry, just running through all this crap. Okay, that's where we're gonna go with. I could change it if we want to, if you feel strongly about it, but feel like that's the best we could go with what I know. Thank you so much. I think we're just gonna get started with this. So yeah, let's buckle up and get going. All right, let's get started. All right. Himatsubushi, for you, the final mystery. The time-killing chapter. Okay, yeah, there we go. I now trust you with all the mysteries hidden within Higurashi when they cry, however comical it may be. If you have reached any conjecture, then you have passed. The final novel is a meager reward for you. Conjecture is impossible. You have the right to reject this story. So he's basically giving us the right saying, like basically we might want to approach this story as a non-canon, because it's mostly like, it's kind of like a gift or a shout out kind of situation. But after so this story might have some bearing, but maybe we don't take any of it too at face value. And then after all said and done here, we'll finally start getting answers and figure out how things actually work in this just cursed valley. Absolutely cursed. Right, let's start. Again, creepy. This arc includes choices that were added in the console version. These choices result in dialogue changes and can lead to bad ends. Do you want to see these choices? Okay, so this is another attempt saying, hey, this is a chance to change things up a bit. It's interesting that it was added in the console version, so that's not the original that was written. So if that's the case, then maybe there's a good case to be made that we should just go for the true ending, like without the choices, because they aren't the original vision of the original creator. Maybe, I guess, how involved was he in the re-release? Because if he sold the rights to everything to another company and then they started changing stuff, I wouldn't be super big a fan of that. I'd rather see the closest thing to the original vision of the original creator I can. Granted, I don't need it to be super pure. If I were, I would be using all the original sprites, which, no, I think the console sprites are probably my favorite. But still, I think we should do... yeah, so the way it's phrasing it here is way better than what it says in the mods. Like, skip additional choices, show only content from the PC version, prompt additional choices from the console version, or prompt choices and highlight correct answers. I'm going to go ahead and stick with what I said before, prompt additional choices from the console version. If you think it's a fun way to explore the game, I'm totally down for it. Downside being, it might mean I have to reload and refine things again, but I don't really mind that. That's fine. Especially because I can save time for you by editing that out. But if you feel like, oh no, like it's too distracting and it just feels too like detached and like has a negative impact on what this story is, then we can switch it to skipping choices and just sticking with like the main path. Or I guess we could also do this and just never click on the not right answers, even though we could just take a peek at what the answers are. But I, for now, want to keep this. Who is the criminal, you ask? Don't we search for them in this story? Who is the criminal, you ask? You don't even know what the criminal did? Who is the criminal? Who is the criminal who will kill me now? I don't know. Frederikian Bernkastel? I don't know who that is. Midsummer, 1985. Isn't that 2 years after the games normally happen? I'd misread at the time and ended up arriving too early. Or is it a few years before? The schedule board flipped with a series of clacks. My flight to Sapporo was still a bit later on. I still had over an hour before boarding. Well, I might as well close my eyes for a bit on that bench over there then. I came here directly from work, so maybe the fatigue was what was making me sleepy. Finding a suitable bench, put my luggage on the seat next to me and settled down. Akasaka. I don't know if we've met you before. I sighed like an old man. I had hoped to stay young forever, but had become splendidly middle-aged. God, fetch, that feels real. Apparently, the rumor that even people in the later half of their 20s experience a decline in their physical strength wasn't a lie. Unfortunately, it's not. I had been mind-numbingly busy at work lately, so I rarely had any time to myself. Again, God, this is just hitting all the notes of depressing aspects of my life. I came here to escape life. This might have been the first time I'd been able to enjoy a journey alone like that since I was a student. The reason behind this trip was to meet with an old friend. It was a bit strange to call him an old friend. In fact, it might be better to call him a bad one. After retiring a couple years ago, he moved to Sapporo, his mother's hometown. Oh, no, this is a few years after. This is Oishi. His mother passed away soon after, and he was now peacefully enjoying his second lease on life. His name was Kurodo Orishi. Yeah, like, 'cause that was exactly what his retirement plan in Chapter 1 was. He was a former detective of the primary investigation unit at the station and the station in Okonomiya, something prefecture. To be honest, the only direct contact we ever had didn't last more than 3 days. After that, we exchanged New Year's cards, but never met again. So this would be the first time meeting him in 7 years. In other words, we met 7 years ago, in 1978. Is that the first year of was that the dam incident year? I think it might have been. Yeah, because, like, in our time of the game, we're in, like, 83 is when, like, we've been witnessing events. And they'd had 4 previous Watanagashis. They had the first one, which was the dam incident. Then they had the collapsing Satoko's parents at the kind of mountain view. Then they had the Furade where then we had Rika's parents, or was that flipped? Was it Rika's parents first and then Satoko's? It was one of those two. And then we had Satoko's aunt in the 4th year, who was gosh darn it, all the names are blurring together in my head. Satoshi. And then the 5th year is the year we're in. So if you work that way backward, that would make sense. Yeah, so 1978 would have been the year of the dam Watanagashi. There was something I just had to ask, to talk to him about considering that time. To explain that, it was impossible not to recall the incident that happened back then. That kidnapping, the details and resolution of which were resigned to darkness. Also, it was impossible not to recall a certain mysterious girl. My name is Mamoru Akasaka. It was a year that had been strangely hot, even though it was only June. Early summer, 1978.
先生、さようなら。
はい、さようなら。車に気をつけるんですよ。お友達の家に寄り道なんかしないように。明日の教科書の準備は必ず寝る前にしておくんですよ。
Clatter, clatter, clatter. The lively sounds of children running toward the hallway.
でさ、つってんだぜ。そんなの俺持ってるわよ。いらねえよ。
The unique high-pitched voice of youth. The energetic shrill of the cicadas was completely unheard by their ears. Children returning home from school split off one by one from groups of friends as they went through intersections in the residential area. Even though there were several of them in the group as they left school, as they got closer to their homes, their numbers dwindled. That's why the fewer friends you were walking home with acted as an indicator that you were that much closer to your destination.
じゃあな、会うわよ。また明日ね。
He finally parted ways with his last friend. A van was parked at the bend of the road. The window was open, the sound of the radio leaking outside. It must have been a news or something.
たため、道路交通法違反、公務執行妨害で3名を逮捕しました。
These must be the protests happening in Hinamizawa.
一連のHinamizawaダム建設反対をめぐる運動は、先月の機動隊との流血事件を境に過激化の一途をたどっており、警察では過激な活動家による次の事件を警戒しています。先週も建設省庁舎前での犬飼建設大臣への直訴事件があったばかりで。
The boy's ears perked up at the mention of the name Inukai. At that moment, the man's face peeked out suddenly from the window of the van. His behavior was a little different than that of a man looking around to see if there was any incoming traffic before he opened the door of his vehicle. His eyes meeting suddenly with an unfamiliar man, the boy panicked slightly.
ウグイス OK。
ひばり OK。前後2ブロック確保した。いいぞ。
The man in the passenger seat whispered quietly. Nodding in acknowledgement, the man opened the door and stood before the boy. Oh.
犬飼俊樹君
So they're going to kidnap him, maybe. See, because, yeah, Inukai. Yeah, so, like you talked about in the radio, they said, Minister Inukai on the steps of administrative construction. So if Inukai is in charge of, or at least spearheading the dam project, and he's related to him, this kid is going to be, these guys must be part of the culty side of Hinamizawa. While asking that, the man appeared at the boy's name tag. Toshiki Inukai. The name was written plainly there. And they have a van and everything. The phone rang for a third time. If he reached out, he could easily pick up the receiver. However, he was concerned that if he picked it up before he had even finished ringing once, whoever was on the other end of the line would think he was a fairly cheap person. That's why he normally never picked up the phone until the third ring. You know, having a childhood where we had home phones, I absolutely understand this. The idea was you didn't want to seem too eager, so you would wait for a few times because then you wouldn't seem like you were like waiting for the phone to ring. Even though it was a worthless habit. However, his thinking was there isn't much meaning in waiting for 3 rings. Wouldn't waiting for 5 be all right? It was very much a reality. His mind filled with such trifling thoughts. He picked up the phone after the third ring had finished. Its reverb dampened by his action.
はい。もしもし。もしもし。
He knew that sometimes due to a malfunction at the switchboard, calls didn't connect well. God, switchboards. That's something I don't, I've never had to deal with, obviously. That's ancient. Well, it's not really ancient, if it was in the 80s, but I could have sworn it wasn't a thing in the 80s. At those times, it was best to hang up and let the person on the other end of the call again. Thinking that the moment he began to hang up the phone, he sensed that he was definitely connected after all. He felt the presence of the person on the other end of the line keeping silent.
もしもし。
There was no way he didn't hear the question. What was the meaning of this? It wasn't like he didn't know that people could use silent calls to harass others. However, he'd never received a call like that until today. Maybe he was just lucky before, but he didn't believe that he would receive such a call on his phone. There were no direct calls to or from this line. Everything had to go through an operator. Therefore, there was absolutely no way a call would be connected unless it was verified there was somebody else on the other end of the line. That's why he didn't understand how to deal with a silent call and instead settled into confusion.
あんた、誰だか知らないが、用がないなら切るよ。また、かけ直してください。
Intending that to be the parting line, he made to slam down the receiver. It was at that moment the person on the other end spoke for the first time.
あなたが名乗ってくれないから困ってんですよ。あんたが犬飼大臣じゃないなら、さっさと電話を切ってください。
He couldn't help but be surprised by the extremely strange voice on the other end of the line. Was there a human alive who could speak with this hoarse and metallic voice? No, this was a voice he'd heard somewhere before. That was the kind of voice that was on those low-bro documentaries that they'd use when they wanted to hide the identity of the speaker, wasn't it? The voice he was hearing over the line was exactly like that.
あんた、誰？
だから、それはこっちが聞いてるんですよ。あんた、犬飼大臣じゃないの？
Anta. He, Inukai, hesitated to answer. Unable to discern the intent of the suspicious phone call, he had a vague feeling that something was off. No way, are you sure about that, dude? He thought about hanging up the phone, asking the operator who initiated the call. However, he forced himself to restrain that urge and for the time being chose to state his name and listen.
そうです。犬飼です。名乗りましたよ。
私の名前なんてどうでもいいんです。まず、あなたがどういう立場に置かれているか、それを認識するところから始めましょう。あなたは今、自分の席で電話をしていますね。では、あなたの席の右側の一番下の引き出しを開けてみてください。
Oh, that's a power move if he snuck something into his office. The lowest drawer on the right of the minister's chair. There was a lock on it, not enough to function as a safe, but nevertheless it was a drawer that contained some valuable things. That's why Inukai thought that the person wanted something of important information contained within that drawer.
すまんが、開けるつもりはないよ。自分の名前も名乗れんやつの言いなりになる言われはない。
引き出しを開けてくれないなら、きっと後悔することになりますよ。まずは引き出しを開けてから考えてもいいんじゃないですか？
Inukai didn't like following orders of the suspicious person one bit. However, he was concerned about what the man was saying, regretting it, so he decided to open the drawer. He took a small key kept stowed in his wallet and unlocked the drawer. His hand stopped right before he opened it. What if there was a bomb inside and would explode if the drawer were opened? That delusion took hold of him. He quelled that instinct and opened it.
開けてくれましたか？そこにあるものが何かわかりますよね。
これはどういうことだ？おい。
どういうことか説明する必要なんかないですよね。
Now, the deranged thing would be like a finger, because that's like something that is like considered a very cruel way to communicate. We are willing to harm who we've kidnapped. But a simpler option, since they're talking about kidnapping a child, would be his school like name tag badge. That would be a really strong message.
時間を差し上げますので、少しお考えください。また後ほどこちらから連絡いたします。それでは失礼。
おい、待て。もしもし、もしもし。
The call had already ended. That would not change no matter how much he yelled at it. Even still, Inukai, without realizing that, continued yelling into the receiver for a while. The drawer was still open. On top of the folders crammed into the drawer, it lay there. Toshiki Inukai. Written in plain lettering on a grade schooler's name tag, just lying there. Enshrined there, completely out of place, as if it were cowering. This is a work of fiction, and any resemblance to actual persons or organizations is entirely coincidental. Here we go. Starting off pretty strong. Kidnapping, during the damn time. Do you remember, Yuki? This picture? This is where I first proposed to you. That brief moment before you nodded back, you probably wouldn't know just how much it seemed like an eternity to me. Yes, I would never have thought that amount of time could feel like an eternity. Compared to how long I'd waited for you to propose to me, it was. From that moment I met you until today. Compared to that time I've spent since I was born, it might only have been a brief period, but there were definitely precious, beautiful days that deserve to be called an eternity. That time continues even now. From now on. I wonder if it'll be a boy, or maybe a girl. Either one is fine. Boy or girl, either way is living proof that we love each other. If it's a boy, we'll name it after you, Mamoru. If it's a girl, we'll put the Yuki from my name in hers. Thinking about names is so fun that in the end we still hadn't decided yet. That does sound like fun. There's still time to puzzle over it. Not that long of a time, actually. You see, Yuki? There's something I have to apologize for today. It's about your job. Sorry. It looks like an annoying bit of work has come up. And in the worst case, I might not be able to be there for the delivery. It's fine. You have a very important job. What do you what you do protects the way we live. Compared to you, it's nothing. Please go ahead. When you return, I'll be waiting here with our child. Thank you. Also, I'm sorry. Please don't apologize. If you feel guilty about it, then you can just atone. If I atone that much, no matter how much money I have, it won't be enough. It's a joke. Now, go on. It's rough, but that's life sometimes. As I left the room, I bumped into an elderly man. It was Yuki's father. In other words, my father-in-law.
お父さん、邪魔する気はなかったからな。廊下で待たせてもらったよ。聞き耳を立てるつもりはなかったが。生きたまえ、ユキエはああいう娘だ。何があっても自分が君の枷になることを望むまい。
Man, though, like, I understand, like, you have an important job, but it would suck to feel like, come on, like, can they just not be for today?
私はこれまでユキエに様々な犠牲を強いてきました。出産という人生の節目にまで彼女に犠牲を強いることを恥じます。
君が本当にそう思うなら、仕事が終わったらユキエのために時間を割きなさい。
True.
君が仕事を投げ出して付き添ってくれるよりも、そうした方がきっとユキエも喜ぶだろう。
ありがとうございます。
君がとても大切な仕事をしていることは私もよく知っている。自分の仕事を誇りに思いなさい。ユキエは君が見事難題を解決して凱旋するのを楽しみにしている。
はい。
I jumped into a taxi that was waiting outside. Compared to the time when I first got here, the numbers of the fare meter had grown considerably. It seemed the modest time Yuki and I had spent together wasn't so modest from an objective point of view.
待たせてすみません。やってください。
いえいえ。では、参りますよ。
He's like, yeah, no, skin off my back, I got paid the whole time. It actually jerked as it changed gears to accelerate, soon burying the hospital my wife was in behind a throng of buildings. If it was to end up as a really troublesome ordeal, I probably wouldn't be returning for quite some time. To call a rookie like me, and on top of that one who's off duty, seemed like the selection chief was calling all hands on deck. The veteran upper brass gathered on an emergency basis happened occasionally. This was the first time, though, I experienced everybody gathering together like this. Whatever was happening, there's no doubt it was going to be something novel. Right, when my wife was ready to give birth. If I wanted to spend the time to curse my misfortunes, I'll be here all day. Even the verdant ginkgo trees lighting the streets that always brightened my mood seemed to lack some of their usual luster. Eventually, the government office came into view. All of this is like new art, too, by the way. I briefly held my breath, let the feelings of tension course through my body once again. I had to remember the work I was doing was important, necessary, and difficult. I composed myself and sharpened my wit. Ready? The taxi stops in front of the building. Hinamizawa, Tokyo, Metropolitan Police Department, Public Safety Division.
市長、全員揃いました。赤坂君、ブラインドを下ろしてくれる？
The blinds were usually closed when they needed to use a projector or if the discussion was going to contain some particularly disturbing content. The blinds closed with a satisfying sound, darkening the interior of the room. Immediately, the inside of the room was completely drained of a pleasant morning atmosphere, leaving behind only the cold illumination of fluorescent lighting. I like that they actually chose to make it grayscale for that, to make it feel like oppressive. After the supervisor ensured that everyone was present, he nodded to the section chief once again. With everybody on edge of their seats, the chief stood up solemnly and began to give his report.
推定48時間前、建設大臣の孫にあたる建設省幹部の子息が誘拐された模様です。
Alright, so he was kidnapped, and this is now taking place from the position of the guy who we started this whole scene with.
建設大臣は事態を穏便に済ませるため、警察へ通報せず要求に応じるものと思われます。
Seen that approximately 48 hours earlier, the Minister of Construction's grandson, who was also the son of one of his senior staff members, was kidnapped. The reason why it was phrased that way was because the person in question didn't admit to it had happened.
大臣宅の通話を監視した結果、都外からと思われる不審な電話が数件確認されました。誘拐された子供は病気療養中となっているが、通院の形跡はなく、周辺での目撃例もなく、その他いくつかの理由から事件発生は間違いないものと断定しました。
So they keep an eye on things, and they've noticed enough suspicious activity that despite the fact that the person who is experiencing the kidnapping has not reported it, probably because it's one of the conditions of the kidnapping, they are like, no, we're still going to intervene. Here, they omitted the details that brought this incident to light. If you think about it a bit, that meant that before the incident happened, the ministry's residence had been under surveillance already. I won't use the word spied on. Of course, there wouldn't have been a court approval for this, and it would have been very hard to explain to ordinary citizens. However, it was quite an effective method to catch wind of incidents like this before they got worse. Oh, so he's saying that putting someone under surveillance doesn't necessarily mean that they're watching them for criminal activity. They might be watching them because they feel somebody else might take action against them. And that's interesting to see the idea of a cop, a police department proactively, like, anticipating a crime and taking action. Usually it feels like if you wanted something like this, you would have to report like your suspicions and have an adequate case to make the resources worthwhile. But again, you got to think about the prominence of the person, and already seeing so much, like, there's a lot of like fuss and a lot of already violence perpetuated by the Higurashi, not Higurashi, but the what is wrong with my brain? Hinamizawa, like, dam project. The fact that they've already had that, they might already be keeping an eye on powerful people who are involved in that dam project, just because it might, like a type of terrorist or criminal action would seem very likely, and that's exactly what's happened. I'd like for you to understand that dealing with these cases before they become a problem is the job of the Public Safety Division.
なぜ警察に通報せず要求を鵜呑みに？
大臣たる者が警察を信用できないってんだから、世も末だね。
Or they could just have him over a barrel. Like, it might be in a position where they've proven that, like, whoever it is has tons of access already to his life and to his, like, job. Being able to get into a locked drawer that he has, like, what I assume is the only key to get into and to put the badge in is really gutsy. Especially if they also didn't touch any of the, like, really important information in there that could have been used against him, and instead specifically used as a message. That would tell me that you couldn't be able to go to the police, because whatever their influence or power is, it's probably at least extends to the police as well.
犯人グループは誘拐初期に自分たちが大臣の生活をかなり高度に監視していることを警告し、
Exactly.
その証拠を示した様子です。
Making it very clear that there wouldn't be a good way for him to subtly talk to the police without compromising the deal, and thus potentially leading to the death of his son or nephew. I'm not sure exactly.
大臣が屈服し、警察への通報も思いとどまるほどの何かですね。
警察へ通報してもすぐにわかるぞって？
大臣の近辺に内通者がいる可能性か。
Several of the higher-ranking members who seem to have experience with this kind of thing let out deep sighs.
犯人グループの目的が要求にあるのか、事件そのものにあるのかは不明ですが、いずれにせよ、国益を脅かす事態に発展する可能性が極めて高い。
Interesting. If their goal was to simply have their demands met for monetary gain, that would have been nice. However, this was something politically motivated shakeup. Things would get a lot more complicated.
被害者の協力がないということは、脅迫内容も要求も一切不明ということか。
本件は内通者の水準がかなり高いと思われるため、当室のみの極秘捜査とします。
Dang.
また本件は本日より最優先事項となり、これまでの通常業務を一時凍結して対応します。よろしいですね。
After that, the supervisor continued on, tactfully explaining our course of action. If this incident were to become public, it would be possible that the minister's political life would be over. I'll spare you the explanation of how the rest of the dominoes would fall, but in the end, support for the diet would decline, followed by a no confidence vote and a snap election. It might even expand communist influences, which in the 80s was still a prominent concern. In other words, we wanted to handle this delicately.
川崎と佐伯は大臣宅子供宅の通話を24時間監視。大臣の動向を探れ。動きがあるたびに逐一報告せよ。残る各職員は担当団体ごとに本件との関連を調査。最近動きが不穏な特殊ラインは集中的にやれ。
So the commies, Reds, so communists, Reds, which are like I think specifically would be like agents of the Soviet Union, and the Confeds. I'm not sure what the Confeds or Confederationists would be. Not in Japan.
それから外国勢力も水を漏らすな。
I had experienced one or two unamicable situations before. This, however, was the first time I'd seen things get so hectic. Several sophisticated conversations were progressing without the involvement of a rookie like me. I didn't intend to be timid, but I couldn't hide my confusion at this unfamiliar situation.
では、書き打ちに行ってくれ。で、赤坂君は。
Snapped back to alertness upon hearing my name called.
はい。赤坂君は、大臣に陳情してきた環境保護団体関連を調査してくれ。
Right.
中でも、新聞でも騒ぎになってる、Hinamizawaダム建設反対の団体をよく調査すること。
Ironically, he's being put on here because they're most concerned about like international influence and you know maybe potential terrorists, but they're like but they have to cover all their bases, so they're putting the youngest member in charge of just checking with the environmentalist groups because most environmental groups aren't likely are keyed in to try and kidnap people, but they don't realize just how deep the people of Hinamizawa will go, and I'm sure that's where the story is going to lead us, is that they were the ones involved in this.
住民団体の仕業とは到底思えないが、全ての可能性を潰していかなくてはならない。
わかりました。Hinamizawaダム反対か。
直接現地へ行った方がいいだろう。現地県警で情報を取れ。かなり過激な団体らしく、向こうの公安でもマークしてるらしいぞ。
わかりました。現地へ出向します。
So this is how you meet Oishi.
奥さん、出産控えてるんだって？こんなタイミングで申し訳ないけど、協力頼むよ。
I'll let you acknowledge it.
時間がかけられないから、人海戦術で総当たりで行くしかないんだ。
ええ、わかってます。家内も自分の都合が私の仕事に触ることを嫌いますから。
Interfere with her own circumstances? What are you? That's stupid.
すまん。ありがとう。それから、川崎くん、佐伯くん、君たちの応援には。
I didn't want to take a business trip when my wife was about to give birth. Even if I were a little busy, as long as I was in Tokyo, I could head to the hospital right away. On assignment, though, that would be difficult. Even so, I knew the work I was doing was important and fully understood that I was in no position to be selfish. I'd have to make it up to my wife for having been away at such an important time. My wife, Yuki, would probably forgive me with a smile. The only thing she could hate doing would be holding me back. My male ego, though, at least wished she could have tried to stop me. Sorry, Yuki. I don't mind if you always complain that our child is that our father couldn't come to the hospital when you were born because he was too busy with work. It's like one of those things where it's like, it is one of the times where it's excusable. Like, working for public safety is a really important thing. What sucks, however, is like he's being put on a beat, which means he's going to be spending a lot of these days kind of walking around, talking to people, looking at stuff. It's not like he's going to be like putting on tactical gear. He's going to be doing the slow, methodical work of an investigation, which means it's going to feel like he's just out there just hanging out while she's in the hospital or trying to raise their newborn by herself, which is going to feel real annoyingly gross, I'm sure. Next day, I took a bullet train to Nagoya, and from there transferred to the train to XX Prefecture. Getting to my destination by land took several hours. If I was traveling by air, the amount of time I could probably get as far as Hong Kong. XX Prefecture is by no means close. I never sat first class except for work, but whenever I did, the seats seemed stiff. Closing my eyes, I mentally reviewed the documents I read yesterday. The group under investigation, the Onagafuchi Guardians. They were a group of residents opposed to the development proposed under the Hinamizawa Dam project. The local protests were quite heated and were getting more radicalized. Even limited to what was written in the newspaper was there was a bloodshed that occurred during a clash with riot police, interference with the dam construction, too many to count. The number of petitions, sit-ins, and direct appeals to the relevant organizations were innumerable. As an extension of that, there were a direct appeal to the Ministry of Construction the other day.
これがそもそも今回この団体を調査することになったゆえんだ。
Because it kind of makes sense, though, too, like, if you're going to make a formal complaint to, like, the Ministry of Construction, which is basically the highest, like, division of the government that can directly intervene, but you simultaneously perform the kidnapping to put pressure on him to accept it or to push it through, that's an effective way to get it done and make it look legitimate. The land that they lived on was going to be submerged, so it's no wonder they would go into a frenzy over it. Even given that, though, could they really be capable of doing something like kidnapping the Minister of Construction's grandson in order to halt the project? His grandson, okay. With my take on it, I had serious doubts. This kidnapping plot was extremely sophisticated and complicated enough that it was believed there'd be some political backing. This wasn't something that could be pulled off by a group of local protesters. Well, just like the chief said, the plan was to eliminate all possibilities. While I'm in the XX police reference room and take my time investigating, the higher-ups in Tokyo would probably solve the case. Without my involvement entirely. Even if that were true, I couldn't regret being away from Tokyo while my wife was ready to give birth. This was work. There was really nothing I could do. Ding dong. The announcement that we'd be arriving at our destination soon snapped me back to wakefulness. Gogura, XX Prefecture, Prefectural Public Safety Division.
鬼ヶ淵死守同盟。
ええ、地元ではかなり賑わせているようです。
The prefectural public safety department already had the documents and a cup of tea ready and waiting for me.
早い話がダム反対の住民運動なんですが、事実上水没地域の住民すべてが決起したと言っていいでしょうね。
It's kind of crazy that they would be able to just try and move forward with a project like this, like purposely taking like land away from people. I wonder, like, I imagine that this does I've seen stories about how this happens in other countries as well, but I from American perspective, I wonder, I feel like they wouldn't be able to move forward with something like this unless they bought everyone out. I just don't know.
死守なんて古風な言い方が示す通り、相当の決意と覚悟を持った連中です。そこら辺の温和な住民団体とは一線を画すと思っていただいた方がいいですね。
Well, you say that, but at the same time, it doesn't seem like that would have gotten results anyway. So it's like one of those things where, like, if you truly believe in something enough, including like defending your home and your family, like usually you're not going to be content with just like, you know, holding a protest sign and then being ignored. The stack of papers they'd prepared for me to document room was by no means thin.
発足当初はごくごく平均的な住民運動だったんです。それがいつだかの流血事件を境に急にヒートアップしまして、今では暴力主義団体かそれに準じるくらいの過激な勢力に成長したと言えますね。
Violent organizations usually indicate the ones that enforce their own ideology without regard to the democratic process. Breaking that down, many of those organizations held extreme left revolutionary ideologies. Considering that, I couldn't help but be surprised that a citizens group would end up going this far. Radical citizens movements happened occasionally. It seemed, however, that this group was nothing as trifling as that. It seemed like I would have to reconsider exactly what this Onagafuchi Guardians was.
鬼ヶ淵死守同盟が要求。つまりダム計画の撤回を求めるために行いうる活動範囲はどの程度でしょうか。
Sorry, clicked too early. The kidnapping of the minister's grandson was classified. That meant, of course, I couldn't tell the XX Prefectural Department about it either.
ご存知の通り、先週あった犬飼建設大臣への直訴事件では逮捕者も出ています。
There you go.
危険性は十分にありますね。
I skimmed over the list of criminal records related to Onagafuchi Guardians reported in the documents. The contents were all violent, not giving me the barest hint of a feeling that these people were trying to uphold the law.
具体的に教えていただけますか？
The chief opened up a manila envelope, fished out several unorganized sheets, and spread them out on the desk.
建設現場への襲撃事件が最も多かったですね。初期の頃、電源コードの切断や錠前の鍵穴に石を詰める、投石による事務所の窓ガラス割り等の軽犯罪が頻発していました。
Dang, like that's where it started, and like cutting power cords, that's costly. Jamming locks, depending on how they're jamming it, costly. Breaking office windows, very costly. Of course, what really happened first were things like demonstrations, sit-ins, and distribution of pamphlets, lively but democratic forms of protest. However, then the demonstrators and police clashed, which started a riot, leading to numerous injuries and arrest. It was from then on that the Onagafuchi Guardians, like their name implies, began to take more demonic forms of resistance. Demonic, I see what you did there. Also, the Onagafuchi Guardians, so obviously Hinamizawa always had a very culty type of mentality, right? A very insular and religious organization. But when they got formally kind of inducted into this Onagafuchi Guardians, and then we start seeing the Watanagashi murders happen and how they were seemingly politically motivated, it kind of leads credence to this idea that when you formally got them together and you got them basically radicalized, and you kind of got to see that, hey, we can push these people really far, and they're willing to go with it. And we use Onagafuchi, not Onagafuchi, that's the name of the town. We use this kind of preamble of that we're guardians of the valley. Then this is the beginning of being able to use that to meet their own ends. So again, it kind of brings to question this idea of almost a hybrid answer. When I take what's really going on, I think that there is really a power of a curse, and that the curse is real, but I don't think the curse is really in effect as of yet. I think the actions of this group, the Onagafuchi Guardians, and their later like what they would become as the time progresses, maybe it awoke the curse, or the curse started off weak and became stronger and stronger as they continued to invoke Oyashiro's name into their actions, and it kind of gave rise to the curse. But then initially it was just a politically motivated organization that used the curse as an obscuring factor to commit terrible crimes against people that they viewed as their political enemies. It's kind of a fusion of my original ideas, which feels like a cop-out, but it makes a lot more sense that way, especially with the presentation we're getting here.
襲撃が度重なれば地元警察による警備強化がなされるのでは？
それは警戒はしたでしょうね。でもあちらは地元ですから、闇に乗じて忍び込まれたらお手上げでしょう。
You might as well label the entire map of Hinamizawa village around the dam construction site enemy territory. No matter how alert the police were, the locals would just show them exactly how easy it was to sneak around. Yeah, and police are a great deterrent force for crime in the small scale, but in large scale, no matter how trained they are, or even pretty much how well equipped they are, they're just so severely outnumbered, it's going to be very difficult and dangerous for them to operate. Obviously, if you are in full military attire, that's going to allow you to have a lot more control via fear and just military tactics, but they haven't gotten to that point yet. And even then, there still should be a lot of rulers, dictators, and military officers understand that if you have maybe you don't have the support of the locals, but if their resentment and willingness to fight overrides the fear of death, you're gonna find yourself in trouble, because sheer numbers and coordination can actually overcome even the strongest of military tactics.
警察が警備を固めてからは、むしろ挑発されたように過激化が進みました。ほら、この辺りからだいぶヒートアップしてるのがお分かりになります？
Yeah.
事務所の放火、建設重機の破壊工作。 破壊？まさか爆弾でも？
いや、まさ連中ですね。タンクに核砂糖を放り込むんですよ。
Yeah, that makes sense. I remember that.
あれやられたらエンジン焦げついちゃいますから。
Very expensive. Even in Japan, it seemed there had been police doing that to the vehicles of occupying forces right after the war. Compared to misdemeanors like breaking windows, it was extremely violent and aggressive.
そこまでやられたら地元警察の面目は丸つぶれですね。
放火はさすがにですね。それで地元警察が24時間体制の人員を大幅に増員しまして、それで建設現場への襲撃は一段落したようです。
It's too difficult to do it safely. He used the word quieted down, but that was still smack dab in the middle of the list of crimes.
で、連中ですね。現場への直接攻撃が難しくなったとしたら、今度は個人攻撃に切り替えました。最初に狙われたのが工事事務所の現場作業者でした。
See, that's unfortunate because I feel like the construction workers are the least ones. Like, they're just being told to do their job. They have no bearing on whether or not this is actually going to happen. But the reason you target them, it's a terror move. Because if you make the workers feel like they're in danger, if they show up to work, they might be willing to say, you know what, I'd rather not be paid than potentially throw my life away. After that, there was silence. What was being described to me as guerrilla war fought in a jungle. Threats and violence against the workers. Harsh words and harsher rocks were thrown.
かなりの告訴がされているのに逮捕者があまり出ていませんね。
そりゃそうです。第一、目撃者なんかいないんですから。それどころか、現行犯だったにしたってアリバイがポンポンポンとできちゃうんです。
それはどういうことですか？
例えばですね、あなたがHinamizawaで歩いていて、ある男にナイフで刺されたとします。あなたは相手をよく覚えていて、名前も住所も特定できてるとします。ただし、ナイフには指紋がなく、物的証拠だけがない。
So he's describing that a situation where there's no evidence linking that person to the crime, and the only person who's claiming a witness is you, without any backup. You could know for sure exactly who committed that crime, but without any auxiliary support, you're very likely not going to get a conviction.
まあ、ありがちな傷害事件だと思うでしょ。でも、Hinamizawaじゃ完全犯罪なんです。
Everybody is, the entire village, they're all in on it. To protect the man who was perpetrator, they get their story straight and prepare an alibi. To that end, they'll probably even forge some evidence.
裁判にもつれ込ますほかないわけですが。
This right here. To protect the man who was a perpetrator, they'll get their story straight and prepare an alibi. What if... I don't think it was, but what if that was what was happening at the end of chapter 3? Because, Keiichi was going to was committed to taking out Satoko's uncle, and maybe because of what happened before, Mion was able to kind of put together what his intention was, and so they specifically did that. They got their story straight together and prepared an alibi. And so when they talked about how he was at the festival and he did all these things, it was them and the villagers trying to, follow through with this idea of the village protects its own. But then why would Mion and Rena at that time, if that was what happened, then want to lure him out of town, presumably to kill him? There's so much that doesn't even make sense there. That whole story got so wacky at the end. I'm really struggling to find the solution, but maybe that's why they were all saying that. Maybe because, we know he wasn't there, and it feels like there almost must have been a doppelganger. But what if it was simply just a coordinated alibi? If it were that, then that makes a lot more sense, but what happens after doesn't make sense. So I don't know.
何しろ物的証拠はない上、犯人を隠匿する証言だけは後から増えていく。検察も書類送検には二の足を踏むわけです。殺人ならいざ知らず、投石で額を切った、殴られてあざができた程度だと、仮に犯人を特定できたとしても、嫌疑不十分で送検されないことがほとんどです。
Every case is without a doubt perpetrated by somebody in Hinamizawa, but they can't identify who. Even if they could figure who it is, they are unable to obtain enough circumstantial evidence through due process. The villagers were all extremely well informed about this, so they were meticulous, vicious, and tenacious personal attacks continued.
被害者はそれでは納得できないでしょう。検察審査会に再審請求を出さないのですか？
それはですね、審査員たちがみんな厄介ごとに巻き込まれたくないと思っているからですよ。Hinamizawa関係のトラブルには首を突っ込みたがらないんです。
Interesting. The inquest committee is comprised of a random selection of local residents. In the event the prosecutor fails to get a conviction, they have the power to order a retrial. It's a system designed to assert the will of the people and the actions of expert prosecutors in the legal world. Interesting. I don't think we have that system in the United States, but it sounds promising. As I'm sure it has flaws, but like the idea that you can hold the courts basically in contempt if enough common people disagree or feel that like something is afoul with the process, that feels like an interesting type of check and balance. In this case, however, being comprised of local residents has backfired.
首を突っ込みたがらない。それはなぜです？
なんて説明すればいいんでしょう。恐れられているって言えばいいのかな。あそこはね、少し特殊なんです。
特殊？何か政治的なバックボーンが存在するということですか？
It used to be.
いえ、そういうのとは少し違うというか、怖がられていると思ってください。この辺りは口では少し説明しにくいんです。ああ、そうだ。わかりやすいのがありました。
Wiping his forehead with a handkerchief, he opened a file labeling the list of members of the Onagafuchi Guardians.
鬼ヶ淵死守同盟の勢力にはですね、近隣の町々に強い影響力を持つ人間が多々おりまして。
Yeah, it's gonna be Mion's family.
この辺をご覧いただけますか？
I looked, and what I saw startled me. Prefectural and municipal assembly members, staff members of the Chamber of Commerce, an executive of the Business Association, an executive of Town Council Association, and the PTA liaison. There were more than a few people within the lot of say, both locally and in neighboring regions.
この界隈では、Hinamizawaのダム反対運動は皆静観しているのが普通なんです。ダムを肯定するような発言をすると、どこでどう巡って不利益を被るかわからない。
So because the Sonozaki family is so influential, you don't even know what your repercussions would be if you stand out, if you go in support of it.
何しろ近隣の町の喉元はHinamizawa出身の人間が抑えていますからね。
検察審査員のリストは非公開でしょう。報復がされないように何らかの措置が取られているはずでは。
Interesting. That idea is kind of cool. The Inquisition Committee, like keeping it secret. That's kind of cool.
一応非公開でプライバシーは守られてますがね。それを管理してるのは沖宮市役所の人間。つまり地元の人間なんです。守秘義務があるとはいえ、やはり人間のつながりは分かりませんからね。Hinamizawaの人間はそのあたりのつながりがことのほか強固ですから。
It's funny because like for such a small town, they can really be a tough nut to crack. When you consider the obligations and duties people have in the region, the web of information thereby formed is nothing to scoff at. It's not uncommon for housewives in a neighborhood to know which kid from which house is what grade and what school, what subjects they're good at, and what vegetables they hate, among other things.
それにほら、Hinamizawaと遅延の深い暴力団組織がありましてね。これが今回の騒動に全面バックアップしてるらしいんです。こちらが出てくるのが一番効いてるみたいですね。
暴力団？ダムの建設反対で住民と一致？どういう利害が一致するのか読み難いですね。
それは難しいことじゃないです。実はですね、この暴力団の組長がですね、Hinamizawa村の出身なんです。村の重鎮の一人の婿養子にあたりまして。
Exactly what was this Hinamizawa? I thought it was some desolate rustic village. However, for some reason, they exerted a strong influence on the surrounding areas and had a strong sense of unity. They would protect their village by any means necessary, even if it meant resorting to violence. Their chief had said that they were afraid because of the numerous influential people living there. But somehow, I got this feeling that they were afraid of the village itself. There was something clearly different from what I'd read in documents about in Tokyo, This is no simple residential protest against the dam. For some reason, an uneasy feeling began to nestle itself at the back of my mind. I chose the most basic way to ask my question. In other words, I directly asked what I wanted to know.
室長、これは例えば仮の話ですが、
はい。
例えばその鬼ヶ淵主導名がダム計画を頓挫させるため要人を脅迫するようなことは考えられますか？
The chief replied immediately.
あり得るでしょう。事実、彼らは市役所や県庁、建設省の工事事務所にも押しかけ、恫喝まがいのことをしていますし、
Yeah.
工事関係者の家族が不審者につけ回されたという事件も起こっています。
Well, that would make sense. To halt progress on the dam, they raided the construction site, destroyed heavy machinery, lighting the construction office on fire. If they didn't have any qualms about doing that, threats and violence against people related to the dam would probably be no problem. But that was it. Even if your everyday hoodlum could use threats of violence. However, this time, it was the kidnapping of the minister's grandson, an abnormally high-level crime. Not only was putting off the kidnapping difficult in the first place, but so was maneuvering to have the minister surrender to the demands immediately. There was no way for this was the work of amateurs. Did these people have the power to enact this large of a crime? That was the heart of the matter. Was the Onagafuchi Guardians an organization capable of pulling this off? In order to ask that question once again, I chose the most basic method.
例えば政府要人の関係者を誘拐して脅迫。
He's basically telling him what
あり得
happened.
ると思いますか？
There's no way they could pull off something that big. That was the answer I most hoped for. If it was that answer, my work was as good as halfway done. I might be able to get back in time for my wife to give birth. That was how it was supposed to be. The chief, without a hesitation, replied,
やるかもしれません。そこの知れない連中ですから。
Sorry, Yuki. It seemed like my work wouldn't end so simply after all.
おう、赤坂君か。ご苦労さん。担当地域での情報収集はどうですか？
順調です。これから現地警察の公安と接触できることになりましたので、
Yeah.
現東京の調査の方はどうですか？
他の職員も順調に調査を進めているよ。でも調べる団体が星の数だからね。そんなに悠長に時間もかけられないし。
There's no new developments at this time. No matter how suspicious the Onagafuchi Guardians was, if they solved the case in Tokyo, my job was done. It looked like my wishful thinking wouldn't come to pass. Hanging up the phone, I let my gaze drift outside the window to the valley of unfamiliar buildings.
赤坂さん、今、お貸しできる車が戻ってきました。ご案内しますので、こちらへどうぞ。
あ、すみません。
He showed me the elevator to the underground parking lot where the battered sedan was waiting for me. That the steering wheel kept drifting to the left was a little concerning, but it would be enough to get me around for a while. Okay. I think this is a decent place to stop because he's now kind of moving on. We've got a good feel about what this is going to be. This is about investigating the valley itself during the dam project shutdown, and we're probably going to get a lot more details because I imagine like one of the penultimate events of this chapter is going to be the actual like incident at the dam site, the murder that leads to the shutdown of the thing. Maybe that's part of why, because I remember Mion talking about how the family took on multiple angles of attack for trying to bring about the end of the dam project, and this is probably just one of the other extreme options that they took up. But maybe the murder of the dam leading to the shutdown of the dam construction operation, either it's going to facilitate the return of the child because it's no longer necessary to hold him hostage, or maybe that's the real reason why the dam project got halted. The murder just was a culmination, kind of a delivery of promises, and then they call after the murder happens. They call him and say, "Hey, your child's next if you don't make this go away," and then they make it go away, and they essentially win. I think that's going to be interesting to see, and also how it all plays out. Again, we got to be careful. We can't take too much of this as canon, or at least it seems like we can't, so we have to take everything with a grain of salt, but I'm really interested to see how this goes. It's really fascinating to finally have the story from a different person's perspective. And I think that's like very telling of just how fun it's going to be in these answer arcs, at least with like the Shion angle, to see where she came from and what she saw. Because again, she's interesting because she's so involved directly in the Sonozaki family, which is obviously heavily involved in everything, but she also is not the heir apparent for the family. And so living outside of Hinamizawa itself, she probably has a very different view, especially because she seems to be very opposed to the actions that the core family is taking. I can't wait to see what that's all about, and I'm really excited to see how this plays out. So thank you so much for joining me. Hope you enjoyed yourselves, and we're getting started with the next section. Got some spicy things coming up on the horizon, but I'll kind of keep you in touch with all of that as we continue on. But in the meantime, thank you so much, and until this video, watch me out to see me in next. I'll see you there.